Who am I? Before I came into the truth of knowing that we are the children of Israel, well, I believe the lies of our origin and the fable of our beginnings. And as a result, I too became lost. I instead believed that I was an African American, a Hamite, a colored man. And that's what I taught my children. And then something happened. And then he came and took off my mask and exposed my true identity that lied beneath the surface. It was always there, waiting for the right time and the right place to be revealed. That I am an Israelite, the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Most High Yah's holy, set apart people, reborn. The time of the Great Awakening.
But thank you for hopping on, Dr. Elhaik. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me. Absolutely fine. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all the viewers.
Good. Excellent. All right, family. Well, if you're not familiar with Dr. Elhaik, just to kind of give you some background from my perspective. Mm-hmm. So I, of course, I do a lot of, documentaries and, working with, Moray, Josh with Rebirth, and Mo, our chiefs. And, as we're, putting together some of these documentaries for, at least, for me, there's at least 2 or 3 documentaries, most of which we haven't released yet, where I use Dr. Elhaik's, his research. And basically, it's a part where, where I'm dealing with the history of the Ashkenazi Jews, and as far as tracing their origin, whether it be through their language or DNA. Dr. Elhaik was one of those papers that comes up in Google, when you're doing your research. And I must say, his research, his work has been paramount, has been key in refuting a lot of the narrative as far as the origin of the Ashkenazi Jews. And I won't say too much more than that, because I'll let you, Dr. Eran, kind of give our audience, a bit of your background. But I just wanted to give that footnote that I personally have used a lot of your work, and I mean your work is actually teed up on some of my upcoming documentaries. And let me tell you, family, it's one of those it's one of those key pieces of evidence that that when it was put out there, you caught a lot of flack for it. Let me stop talking. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doctor.
You know what? And too, I could share the sentiment too. It's an honor to be on the panel with you, Doctor, because I too, about 10 years ago, came across your paper with your findings with the John Hopkins paper. I can't remember the actual site off the top of my head, but bringing into question the commonly held assumptions about the Jewish community in terms of the DNA trace, the patterns, and so forth. So I'd like to say as well, really appreciate your work, and just the the boldness, especially to be able to present this information that may stir up much needed questions, which it should, but to still press forward and reveal this information publicly. So I really appreciate you. So I'll fall back. Really appreciate it again, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your kind words. It's heartwarming to hear that. Yes, my little bit of my background. My background is computational biology. I studied both biology and computers and mathematics and statistics. So I did my PhD at the University of Houston. Then I did my postdocs at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, School of Public Health. I became a faculty there for a short while. Then I moved to England to start my first season professorship. And then I recently moved to Sweden to become associate professor here and lead the bioinformatic studies. The studies that you're referring to was in the middle phase of my career when I moved to Johns Hopkins. I started doing population genetics. At that time, the first genomes of Jews were published, and that was thrilling for me because I've always been interested in history and genetics. And there are always different versions and disagreements at that time between historians, of course. And it was crucial for me to know who's right. And when that data became available, I began analyzing it, and I got completely different results from those that were published. And it took me 6 months where I haven't done anything. I just sat on the train and just thinking and thinking. I knew the papers by heart by then. I didn't even need to read them. And I was just thinking, what have they been doing that is so different? And in this, mental exercises that I did, I began to peel layer after layer of these disguise, of these methodological fallacies, of these assumptions, of these false assumptions, of this truthiness that are not really there and are not really scientific. And that took a very long time because everybody were doing it, the same things. And after 6 months of doing nothing, just thinking, I started to do the experiments and to show that actually those papers that were published were not really designed to discover anything except what the authors wanted to show, that modern day Jews are close to Israel without having any other data. When the data without having ancient DNA data by that time. So how do you make this connection between people who are looking Europeans, for all intent and purpose, speaking European language, Yiddish, very similar to German or Slavic, with Slavic component? How is this all of a sudden become a Semitic language? No idea. But none of it fit one with proper methodology. Once you're comparing, okay, let's properly compare hypothesis number one. Do Jews look like Levantine people? Hypothesis number two. Do Jews look like people of the Caucasus, who would be the closest relatives of the Khazars and the Turks and all these other people in this area? And when I compared these two hypotheses for the first time in the history of genetic literature, not just doing the first hypothesis that tells me what it is that I wanted to show. Yeah, doing one hypothesis is easy. You always get the answer that you want. When you compare hypotheses, all of a sudden you get a different answer. And that study was not easy to publish. But once it was published, then it's made revolution in the field that I was unaware of, and people wrote me and said, "Wow, you've put your footstep in this field of genetics. That was a lasting landmark." And what are you talking about? But that was this greatness of this study. The follow-up study that I did was published 3 years later. Now with novel methodology that I developed, this biogeographical methodology that allows you to take a DNA and put it any place in the world where it has originated. That technology did not exist. So once again, how do we locate people in the map without this technology? Well, again, we're by imagining those results. When I developed this algorithm, this GPS, geographic population structure, Ashkenazi Jews were mapped to southeastern Turkey, which was very peculiar. It was not Israel, it was not Khazaria, it was somewhere in Turkey that had absolutely no significance in Jewish writing and that we know of. And I sent my postdoc to the library with a sandwich and spare socks, and I told him, don't come back without an answer. We need to understand why Jews are going to Turkey. The algorithm is very accurate. It was very accurate for every other population except the Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, of course, that it placed them in Turkey. He came back with a huge book like this, 600 pages of ancient traveler journeys, documentaries. That people walked around, just like Benjamin of Tudela, they walked around and they documented the place that they went. So we could get a glimpse of ancient villages and settlements that are not on the maps anymore. And in this book, we found 4 areas, all of them exactly where GPS pointed us, settlements that do not exist anymore, only one survived, whose names derived from the word Ashkenaz.
Wow.
So we have Ashkuz, Ashanaz, Iskuz, and we all of a sudden, from having no place in the world whose name derived from the word Ashkenaz, not Jews. Jew is easy to find. It's a very short word. It exists in other words. Finding a place that's called Jew means nothing. Ashkenazi is a very long word. From having 0 places, all of a sudden we jump to 4, all of them in the same place, all of them where genetics told us that it will be. And that place also fits with the place of the kingdom of Ashkenaz mentioned by Jeremiah. The kingdom of Ashkenaz was not Germany. Jeremiah was not prophesied that Germany would go fight Babylon. That did not happen. He didn't know where Germany was. So there is no way that Germany is Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz was and has been always Armenian and Iranian lands. And this place where we found the Ashkenaz perfectly fit the missing kingdom of Ashkenaz, because you have Madai and you have the other kingdom, the Jeremiah prophet, and that's exactly the kind of groups. Now we can make a circle of the kind of kingdoms that were going to wage Babylon. Not exactly happened the way he expected. Eventually it was the Persians who conquered the Babylons, but they were in the neighborhood too.
Yeah, and actually, I was going to say, to your point, Dr. Eran, I was trying to share this table of nations here. I don't know if it'll show up.
Yeah, it's a table of nations. Is the top second from from the right on the top.
Yeah, let me see if I can share this tab instead. There we go. So to your point, and this is what I found interesting. So I'll just kind of repeat just a little bit of it, just so that people are following. So basically, you use GPS to determine where the Ashkenazi lived, or their point of origin. And I think there's another methodology that you use, but I'll ask you about that in a second. But basically, you based off of your calculations, you were able to pinpoint them. And I guess the location, if we're looking at the location in the table of nations, it would be in the location of Ashkenaz.
Exactly. It's exactly where you're stepping. It's a little north to Lake Van, but you see the word Ashkenaz is there on the map. It's a little southwest from that.
Okay.
It's right there.
Yep. And it's, like I said, it's interesting because I think, so did you also do another study where you compared the DNA of, I guess it was kind of like a genetic distance comparison, right? Where basically, for those who may not be familiar with genetic distance comparisons, you basically, you're comparing 2 people or 2 groups, one to another. And depending on how, if they're closely related, then the genetic distance value should be small. And, Dr. Eran, please correct me. Feel free to correct me if I misspeak. But if the closer they're related, the smaller the genetic distance value. Like a mother and father or sister, brother, their genetic distance value is going to be extremely small compared to someone that's like a 4th or fifth generation cousin.
Exactly.
So when we take that and we extrapolate that and we apply that to, to genetics, and we're looking at populations around the world, let's take, and we take the Ashkenazi, for example. And this is why I love the comparison that you did, because it's one of those things where it's so obvious that we should have done, from the beginning. And that is, let's say, let's take where you think you're from, and we'll compare your DNA to that place. But we'll also take your DNA and compare it to this other place where I think you're from, whether it be Georgia or the biblical Ashkenaz, that sort of thing. And let's just see, which one you're closest to. Mm-hmm. I may say, as a researcher, that you're from biblical Ashkenaz. You may say that you're from biblical, Israel. Let's see which location you're closest to. It's like, that's just the easiest, simplest comparison that you can do. And when you run that comparison, and like I said, keep me honest here, I just want to make sure I'm representing the research, but when you do the comparison, you find that over and beyond that the Ashkenaz population have a closer genetic distance value or closer relationship to biblical Ashkenaz. Is that a true statement?
So when you do this kind of comparison, it's important to be honest. And when you read those studies, you have to read them critically, because the easiest misconception to create and to falsify is to exclude the population that are the closest to the test population and include only about the population that you want to show. So for years and years, Ashkenazi Jews were compared to Palestinians and to English.
Right.
They came closer to the Palestinians, hence the connection to Israel. But those were just two people that are very different. And when you include populations like Italians and Caucasus people, Georgians, Armenians, Jews would be closer to Georgians and Armenians than to Palestinians. But these comparisons were not done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So go ahead, finish your thought.
So this is what my study did for the first time. It shows, let's compare to Palestinian, let's compare to German, let's compare to those Caucasus populations, and these Caucasus and Italian population came up. Now, when some groups do compare to the Italians and they find the similarity, they dismiss it by saying, oh yeah, that was the Roman exile. What Roman exile? There was no Roman exile. The Roman did not come to Israel at the year of 70 to exile population because they needed people to pay taxes. That was far more important than taking how many people were exiled. They took people to serve on their ship. They did not come with trains.
Right.
Okay. Right. They had to go back to Italy at some point. Okay. They cannot exile even if they wanted to 100,000 people, because they would break the slave market. Okay. It would create inflation in the market. There was no Roman exile. This is just one of those lies that we're told at school. I was told at school.
Yeah. Well, to your point, just to make sure everyone is getting the point. So let's say, for instance, if I'm sure everyone remembers Jerry Springer, right? Well, and Dr. Eran, I'm not sure if you are familiar with Jerry Springer, being from overseas, but there was this show where the question of who the father was, when it came to this this child, this illegitimate or legitimate child, the whole purpose of the show was to determine who was the father. And so there would be this gentleman that would be on stage, mm-hmm. and they would try to figure out, if he was the daddy, so to speak. And of course, they go off and do the DNA test, and the climax of the show would be, you are the father, or you're not the father, that sort of thing. But to your point, let's say, for instance, if you're trying to find the father of the child, so the easiest thing to do to not find the father is to not compare your DNA to the father.
Exactly.
Right? So instead you would compare it to 5 random people. Maybe you compare it to the uncle. Maybe you compare it to the friend, the milkman. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you run it and you say, oh well, look, we're not related.
Exactly.
That sort of thing.
Exactly.
But what you're doing, and what I think that a lot of the community probably needs to start doing. That is, run these comparisons against the right group. Make sure you're running the comparison against the right group, because when you do that, you can very easily determine who's who. And so I think, go ahead.
Compare it to all the groups, and then you find the right groups.
That's right.
All known groups. And the point about the Italian, just to explain this, because it's not obvious, the similarity to Greco-Romans can be easily explained by their shared past with where we have now Turkey. Remember, Turkey was conquered by the Italian. They call it Constantinople. It was their capital city. So south to the Black Sea, there were always Greco-Romans and Iranians, all of them mixed. And these are the populations that their hybridization created the Ashkenazi Jewish genome. And because after they left this region, they avoided mixing with other populations to a certain degree, of course, they preserved this South Black Sea genetic signature that allowed us to come back after thousands of years and trace them back to where they were. If they were mixing with other populations, these Black Sea signatures would have decayed. It would have disappeared.
That's a good point.
And I had a question too, to your point, Doctor, especially with the discussion about the genetic distances, and then some of the other, if you want to call it, theories that many came up with to try to, confirm who's who. It was just a certain targeted group in terms of with some of these tests, like the genetic distances thing, like you pointed out. It was, I believe it was the Romanians, the Hungarians. It was a very selected group of people, and so with that being said, I want to ask a question about the other one that they had, the other, theory or hypothesis that was out there about what is called the random genetic drift. Would you be able to kind of get clarity on that? And then also, for me, I believe the contradiction of the Kohanim gene is a little bit of a contradiction, especially if the Levites, if Levi is one of the sons of Jacob, then all of them should have the same Y mutation, that of their father. But can you shed some light on that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, let me, when you see Ashkenazi Jews sharing high similarity to Romanians and Hungarians, this is because both of these populations were offshoots of the Khazars. They were both founded by these members of the Caucasus who ruled this area of north of the Black Sea, where we have South Russia nowadays, between the 7th and 13th centuries. Very powerful empire. They converted to Judaism in the 8th century, and they sent offshoots to Eastern Europe. And we still some Ashkenazi Jews are mapped to this region of Ukraine. They're not all mapped to Ashkenaz. Most of them are, but some of them are mapped to Ukraine, and we can see very nicely some kind of migration route using GPS. The second question you asked was genetic drift. Genetic drift is when we have these mutations that are by chance, that are random, and they accumulate over time. Now, the more time passes, the more of these mutations accumulate. And if a tribe moves from one place to another, two things can happen. They can maintain marriage within that tribe, in which case they will preserve the original signature of the first tribe that they left, and allows us to make connection between these two. The second thing, they can start mixing with the local environment, like almost always happens, and then they will for a while show a mixed signature, and then depends on the level of mixture, they will start moving toward the hosting tribe. But if we're looking at the first strategy, if they maintain marriage within the tribe, over very, very long time, they will not be identical to the original tribe anymore because of this accumulation of random mutations that only happen in this tribe, but not in the original tribe. It happened in the original tribe too, but different random process. So they're not going to be identical. And over time, they're just going to be split. Now, the extension of these splits depends on how much time has passed. And that's genetic drift. Now, in the populations that we're talking about, Ashkenazi Jews, we're looking at 1,000 years. That's not enough time for random drift to create completely separate things. However, you mentioned it, and that's very good because it's a chance to refute another myth. Random drift has been used to explain why Ashkenazi Jews are different. When you compare them to the Palestinians, they don't look like Palestinians. When you compare them to English, they don't look like English. So they said, oh yeah, they because they married each other, random drift took its shot and created this unicorn. That's not true. They're just not being compared to the right populations where they came out. If you compare them to the population we mentioned, these Southern Europeans, Turkish populations, you will see much higher similarity. Genetic drift does not act so quickly.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because when I did some research on it, it was according to the numbers and basically that formula that was laid out, it can take anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 years for that, I guess, whatever that that mutation to become permanent, a permanent marker. So, yeah, you answered the question. And the other question was about the Kohanim.
Absolutely.
You know, because that, for me, didn't really make sense. If all the sons share the same father, how can one son, why mutation be different, especially, you know, from the others, the other brothers? So I just had a question on that as well.
Exactly. First, if I may say, it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you. You're on top of the fields, and I take great pleasure in discussing with you and answering your questions. Let's say that you're on the beach and you see people with bathing suits. You know, some are red, some are yellow, some are white, some are purple with red stripes. You're going to ask all these people, who are you guys? How come you're the only one with purple and red stripes and everybody else are, plain colors? They're like, we're from this city, Beersheba. That's where I am. We all shop at the same store. They're the only one who has it. Like, how interesting. Let me take your DNA. You're going to take their DNA. You're going to also sample the other bathing suits. Other bathing suits are from all over Israel. Okay, we have only one Mediterranean Sea. Everybody are going there. They're going to come from everywhere. The people who are wearing the purple and red striped suit will be much more similar to each other than all the other ones, just because the cities in Beersheba are sort of organized by ethnicity, sort of. And then you're going to come up and say, hey, look, the orange and red stripes bathing suit wearers have all common origin. Some ancestors who probably invented this bathing suit. How exciting. This is exactly how the Levite study was done. And with the beach example, I was not exaggerating. They went to the beach and they sampled people with that surnames. They once again compare it to English. They saw that all the people with the Levite do not share the same DNA. They don't. Third of them did. They decided that those thirds must represent the Levite because they all share. That does not mean that. That means they all have some kind of common origin. Perhaps we can agree on that. But it does not mean they all have one Levite ancestor. What about the other ones? You have 66% of the people who do not match. But this majority of evidence was dismissed in favor of the much cooler and much small sample size, things that happen, unfortunately, often in science. And then the whole Levite legend was born. Of course, there was a follow-up. It created, spun this anonymous company, Family Tree DNA, to the front stage, allowed them to become extremely successful, selling those DNA tests that told people whether they're Levites or not. And then continued with follow-up studies that unfortunately were less yield results that were not very favorable to these Levite mutations. What happened was that the same mutations were found in Africa and in all the Arab countries that surround Israel. So that wasn't really cool. I mean, that's not what we wanted. No longer this unique, homogeneous priestly group that we, at least the scientists, imagined. So they defined another haplotype that was longer, hopefully to lose some of those baggage, unwanted necessary populations. That did not help. The extended region in the DNA that was shared among the Jewish Levite was once again shared among all the other ones. And then the research was abandoned because this was a dead end. The legend continued to live, of course. People do not read all those papers that tells you that they were unsuccessful in identifying some kind of signature among the people who carry the surname Levite on their Y chromosomes. People don't know that, and most people don't think why there is no reason in the world that such a signature would be found. Okay, people who carry the surname Levite and Cohen are the first and second most common names in Israel. That was not the case in the Bible. The Levites were a minority. Do we have any reason to believe those Levites over the years created so many offspring that all of a sudden they become the first and second most common names today in Israel? No, of course not. Can we explain why some villages, all of the people are named Levites, and then in some villages none are? Of course not. Do we realize that people did not have surnames until a few hundred years ago? Once again, these questions are not being asked. So once again, it's a very good example to how myth is being created and maintained and being pushed for profits.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that, like I said, the beauty of it all, given the complex web of disinformation, for lack of a better term, I would say that the beauty of it all is that, I think at the end of, like I was saying earlier, I think that at the end of the day, if there's some contention as to where, like for instance, where the Jewish people come from, if they want to, validate, their belonging to, that land, validate them being, Israelites or whatnot. The easiest way to do it, is just to do a simple genetic distance test. Like that's it. Like you don't have to, climb onto the top of Mount Everest. You don't need to do some super, some super complex computation. I would say, I guess my challenge, to those that would want to argue to say that of course, like the Ashkenazi are in fact the original indigenous population of Israel. I would just simply say, then simply compare your DNA to the group or that's in Georgia, in Russia, Georgia.
Yeah.
That's it. And just see if it's is it closer to to Russia, Georgia, or is it closer to the to the Palestinians? So
yes. But those tests, of course, are not commercially available. What happened is that commercially available tests include the Ashkenazi group already in the test. And when you compare Ashkenazi to Ashkenazi, the Ashkenazi group will come up and mask all the other results. Okay. So on the one hand, you have people paying to know what they already know, which I find ridiculous. And on the other hand, you have a company not sending results that may upset people. So all in all, people cannot find out the truth. And all companies do this except my test. My test, I do not include Ashkenazi Jews. This is not the question. This is not the answer that people, I think, want to ask. I think they're asking what the question that we just discussed. Who am I closest to else? Not just to my group. And that's in modern DNA tests. When you're looking at ancient DNA tests, this is a lot more interesting because all of a sudden you don't have Ashkenazi Jews, you don't have Mizrahi Jews. Now you just have farmers and soldiers and metal workers, no-name peasants, only known by their bones. Yep. Now you tell me to which one am I? Do I look like more? Then you will find the answer.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue. Oh, go ahead, Pastor John.
And I think, and you could correct me, Doctor. I believe his name was Zusman Diskin. That when you deal with the genetic distances, he highlighted that all the groups that was part of that test had nothing in common with each other. And go ahead, Doctor. I just thought if you can elaborate on that.
He did, and he was punished for that. He fared a lot less than people in his field. He, during his PhD, found out that his supervisor has manipulated the data the same way we just discussed about Ethiopian Jews, making them look more like other Jewish groups instead of looking like Ethiopian that are not Jews, which is what they look like. Of course, this study has huge ramifications in the political climates in Israel. If Ethiopians, Jews, do not look like other Jews, but rather like Ethiopian non-Jews, who's to say that they're Jews? And then why bring them to Israel? Right? Because there is a big question: are they really Jews? Many of them converted to out of fear or to protect their lives. We do know there were Jews there. They had the Aksum kingdom. They were very powerful, but it fell from its power in the Middle Ages. So are they Jewish or not? Now, what Israel did, they sent this rabbi who asked this question and decided, yeah, they're the tribe Dan. It's right, talking about makeup stuff. But of course, that doesn't solve the question about every individual person and who they married and so on and so forth. Mixing a halakha question, Jewish law, with ethics and morals and modern Jewish law. It was all a big mix. And we needed answers that were slightly more accurate. He suspected that his supervisor has been manipulated data, and he came out and said that, and he nearly flunked out of his studies. Fortunately, he was saved, and he published his several studies showing these, not just his supervisor, but other people in the field were manipulating data about the Kohen and Levites too, to make the results look more biblical and fits the Zionist narrative of there was once a Jewish group, then it dispersed all over the world, but they maintain marriage inside the family. So once again, maintain some kind of genetic signature that is unique to all of them. And here now we can find them. That story is not true, factually not, but there are people who are trying to push it like it is.
And last question. Oh, I'm sorry. You were still going to continue. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Well, just the end of the story. He published a couple of studies refuting those other studies. He published the one with the Y chromosome, which I believe you refer to, showing Ashkenazi Jews are closer to Italians, which is the same thing that I found, except he interpreted a little differently. And at the end of the day, he could not find a position, and he became a technician in some lab in Israel. He finished his scientific career for speaking out the truth.
Mm. And my last question, and I think, and I'll step back a little bit. I know I'm asking a lot of questions, cousin Benayah. But it's interesting that you brought up the tribe of Dan with the Ethiopians of that narrative. But it seemed like that's kind of like a uniform narrative, because you have like the Igbos, and it seems as if that narrative of the tribe of Dan is being superimposed on them. The other ones? I can't think of them off the top of my head. The Yoruba. It seemed like many of them are just that narrative of the tribe of Dan, with the exception of the Limba, that has the narrative of the Levites, because of the Kohanim test or whatever the case. So any thoughts on that? Because I just was curious about your thoughts on that, why it seems as if that narrative of the tribe of Dan is being superimposed on many of the tribes in Africa that are being discovered and confirmed to be blood descendants of Israel.
You're making a very good point. By the 19th century, there wasn't tribe on earth that has not associated itself or has been associated by scientists with one of the tribes of Israel. The story is very known, and the scientists that were there, the anthropologists, the students of Franz Boas and others, not geneticists yet, they went across the world and discovered one tribe after another. And none of these tribes has been in a cave living in isolation. They all met missionaries in their lives. They all knew the stories. They could repeat some of them. They could have adopted some of those habits. So they have been either, again, associating themselves or have been associated by researchers with one of the tribe. It was one of those things that anthropologists tried to do. They believed in the Table of Nations, the same one that is on the screen right now. They believed in that. And they tried to show how these tribes spread. They couldn't. After a while, they realized people of very, very great distances share the same traditions, but not other traditions. And in between, there was nothing. There was no reasonable way to explain it except that we have to move on from these stories, and we cannot accept those claims that those people have that they belong to these tribes. That was the conclusion that scientists left, and they abandoned this hypothesis completely. Until the establishment of Israel and the need to do this, ask this question, which was never supposed to be asked, who's a Jew? The answer is simple, whoever say they are. Back then, there was no motivation for people to really go to Israel unless you're really feel something and willing to go to, to those swamps and risk malaria and everything and go to be a founder of this with this group of people that have nothing else in common except the same dream. But as Israel got better and wealthy and became a social state and a welfare state, more and more people wanted to go there who may not have necessarily been Jews. Many of the Russians who came in the 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union are not Jews. They used fake documents. They knew it. Israel knew it. America knew it. They didn't let them go. They wanted them too. They were very well-educated population because the Soviet Union invested in education. But Israel asked America to block their access so they can get some of the engineers. It was not that they're not Jews. Most of them are, some of them, 300,000 of them are still defined as non-Jews. So meaning they cannot get married in Israel to the general population except their own, except those people in those 300, because they're not defined as Jews by the Orthodoxy. So those questions already all of a sudden became important, and all of a sudden those who would answer those questions. So it was rabbis who came up and said, "Oh yeah, this is a Dan tribe, this is a Naphtali tribe, and so on." All of course were made up. But only now, if I may switch to the topic of ancient DNA, only now ancient DNA from Israel, from people buried in the tribe territories has surfaced. And that's a game changer. That's something I've been waiting for since I got into this field when I was making my first steps in Hopkins and looking from the window and thinking about the next big question that I can ask.
Yeah.
I need ancient DNA from Israel to answer those questions. And only now, as this DNA came up of real tribe people who lived in those territories, and that allowed me to develop this test, which is now available in Ancient DNA Origins website, that allows us to compare people like yourselves to those skeletons from these different tribes and say, are you close to Judah tribe? Are you close to the Levites? Are you close to the Danites? The Danites, by the way, were speculated to be offshoot of the Philistines. And you can see that in the data. Some of them are. It's very cool. Some of them are very clearly of Greek origins, but some are locals, suggesting once again there was some kind of admixture there in Israel.
Yep. And just to add to your point there, Dr. Eran, so just want to make sure everyone's aware of what we're talking about. So before we were talking about, comparing, DNA of people walking around today against other people walking around today, right? Your DNA against modern populations is what people would say. So now what we're talking about is comparing your DNA to the DNA that's extracted from archaeology sites, where, they're able to date, these sites. They know exactly what time period, or have a good idea of what time period, these specimens were, come from, that sort of thing. And they know a little bit about the culture and that sort of stuff. And what they're doing is that they're extracting DNA where they can, and uploading it into a database. And to Dr. Eran's point, at least for us, it's been a game changer. The moment that we were able to start comparing our DNA to the ancient DNA, all of a sudden we started seeing some interesting patterns, to say the least. But I won't go down a rabbit hole, because I know I want to be mindful of Dr. Eran's time, because he is, I think, 6 hours or more ahead. So I know after a while your head might start dozing off. So you want to be mindful of that. So, but to follow up on your point. So, Israel is finally decided to release these ancient DNAs, and I guess we are, to a certain degree, and let me know if it's the true statement, but we are, how can I put it? We are victims, or we are dependent on the DNA that they decide to release, if that's a good statement, because there's a time period and a place. And what I mean by that is that the DNA that's extracted is extracted from different places from around Israel, from different time periods from around Israel. And one of the things that I've been pushing for the longest is, when you go to, like I said, I'll make this really quick, because I just want to be mindful of your time, Doctor. Let me do this real quick screen share, if I could. Let's see, screen share. Oh, it's over here. So if I go here, hopefully you can see the screen, and yeah, you can see it. All right. So this is like the British, the British Museum. I click on here. I'm looking at the Lakesh relief. So this is a point in time, in history, where we know we have a picture of the Israelites, right? So this is a picture of the Israelites, and folks will look at that and say, oh, these are a Negroid people, short, nappy woolly hair. And then we also have the cranial analysis that goes along with it. And so in this particular slice in time comes from a particular point in time. And for me, I'm like, man, the only thing that would finish off this, that would confirm, that would be I guess a triple confirmation on this finding, would be DNA, ancient DNA. So to this date, I'm still waiting for the DNA that comes from this archaeological site, because I think there was keep me honest with you guys, I think it's like over 300, 600 possible skulls that were extracted from that site, but for whatever reason, we can't seem to get the DNA from that site. But in any case, to Dr. Eran's point, but there are other DNA extracted from various places around Israel. And let me see if I can pull up your site in 1 second here. I thought I had it pulled up already. I guess I did not. Oh, here it is. And it is called ancientdnaorigins.com. So ancient DNA.
The site is not shown.
Oh, it's not showing? Okay.
No.
Let me share this tab.
Now it is.
Okay. So this is another game changer, in that you're able to check or compare your DNA to to some of the ancient DNA that's extracted from the archaeological sites from I guess various places in Israel. And let me see if I can back up here, and I'll let you, if you want to give some commentary on it.
Yeah, absolutely. First, you can scroll down a bit on any tribe and see where the extracts were from. You can scroll down a bit. Yep, you see it there. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for presenting it. I agree that it is a game changer. Like I said, I've been envisioning it since I got into this field. Expand on the point that you made. The data that we have, or the data that are being published, and the data that I collected, Not all data are being released. The Khazars samples, the first Khazars samples that were sequenced, were not released. Why? Because people did not want to show Ashkenazi Jews being compared to those Khazars and show how similarity. And that's very unfortunate, because I actually know these researchers, and I asked them for this data many times, and they did not release it. They're just afraid. And the same with all the other findings. So there is some kind of higher intelligence deciding which data to release and which ones, and for its own motivations.
Yep.
Now, to overcome those limitations, I developed AI tools that are taking bits and pieces of the published data and create reconstructions. So just like you're using ChatGPT to tell him, hey, write me a cover letter for an IT job, and it creates this Word document. How does it do it? Because it uses bits and pieces of other letters that it has to create what you're asking. And it works in the same way. And with that way, we were able in ancient DNA origins to reconstruct all the 13 tribes of Israel, 13 because Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. So it's 13 tribes that lived in Israel, including the Judeans, including the Levites, and the Simonites. And the reason I mention these three, because they are showing the highest African genetic similarity. And that is another major discovery that is not being openly discussed. These people have the E1, B1Y haplogroups, and they're showing signs of African in their autosomal group, which is what you may find when you take these tests. This is exciting for me, and I'm sure to you. The Bible is not shy about showing those African connections, of course. There is the story of Zipporah. Prophet Amos says that the Israelites are like the Cushim, the people from Cush, we believe Sudan or Ethiopia. And there are other instances where the Miriam insulted Zipporah for being black, and she was punished. So that was something that was frowned upon. The people who edit the Bible saw it necessary to include this story. And that's quite fascinating. That shows there is so much that we don't understand in the ethnic composition of the Israelites, that right now this ancient DNA that we find give us some idea that, you know what, it was much more common in this area to have African DNA. Or could have been, I mean, we call it African DNA. It could have been just Levantine DNA that went to Africa, and now it's coming up, right? The direction is still unknown. It should have been back and forth, of course, but we will need more data to answer this question, and which is why we need the help of the community, and which is why I'm grateful to Yeshaya for inviting me to this show. And the more people will participate in this project, the better job we can do to reconstruct the story of the ancient Israelites, and on the way, your stories.
Yeah.
And I appreciate it. And to Benayah's point, I went to your site, the Ancient DNA Origins, and I actually purchased the entire package for, to get everything, all the results. And I did see, and I know it's going through some upgrades and changes along the way, but I did see, for example, a connection, for example, to the Levites, and can you kind of share a little more information on that? Because I did see the Levites, and I know early on I saw some of the other tribes, but some of them kind of disappeared, but the Levites are there. So can you shed some light on that?
Absolutely. So first, you didn't disclose what similarity you had, and I respect that. It's your results. I can only share that some members of the community emailed me, and they said they have 20% Levite.
Yeah, I think mine was 15%.
Fell off the chair. That's a lot. We're talking about very high genetic similarity that survived over time, and that's just crazy. And again, before I continue, I just want to dispel some kind of myth and explain how it works. People come and say, how is it possible if the genetic material is being halved in every generation? yes, it is being halved in every generation, but not if you maintain marriage within the community. Because in this case, it's half from mom and half from dad, but altogether it's one if mom and dad have both of them the same genetic information. Okay, this is how the Neanderthal it can be found at 2% in all of Europe. It is not disappearing over time. It's too stable because at this point, both the mom gives, it's from her mom's 2%, I'm getting 1, from my dad 2%, I'm getting 1, and it's 2 again. Okay, so it's not being halved. It all depends on on the history of your family. So finding these high percentages is super exciting. And once again, the Levites were Egyptians. We know that because they had Egyptian name, Hofni and Pinchas, Moses. These are all Egyptian names. It is believed that they are the ones who brought the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And it is speculated they were a member of the Chapil, which is a member class of workers that were in Egypt, that at some point rose to prominence because there was a revolution in Egypt, and all of a sudden those Chapil became kings. Okay, and they ruled Egypt for a short while. When they were overthrown, they may have escaped from the new pharaohs. At that time, they could have arrived to Israel and bring with them the knowledge and the story and experience that they acquired in Egypt, and they become the Levite. As you all know, they did not have a territory. The name Levite in Hebrew means joining, something that is adjoining you. They were not a core member. They're not mentioned in the Deborah song, which was one of the oldest pieces of the Bible. They're not mentioned there, probably because they did not exist back then. They joined later on. Okay. So it's a very fascinating group with very exciting history, and they're highly African.
Yep. So to point out,
appreciate it.
Yeah, good question, and just a few quick things as well. So on the website, off to the right, see where on the blue section. Hopefully my screen is still showing. But see where it says Levite tribe, and then it has the date here, 1250 and 1170. So this is the time period that I'm most interested in. Well, not necessarily this particular time period, but what I would love is for samples to be released. And I know, like I said, I know this isn't anything that you control, Dr. Eran.
Nope.
But my what's going on around here? But my request, out to whoever is the gatekeeper, and it's funny because it's like they've held on to this information for so long. I'm not even sure if I trust it if they released it at this point. It's almost like food in the restaurant. If someone's taking too long to put food in the back, it's like, was you really sure if they took like 30 minutes, an hour and a half to fix your food? But
exactly.
But in any case. I think that, because before we were talking about genetic distance value, and that if you were to compare your DNA against the right group, I believe, this is, like I said, just a hypothesis that I'm throwing out there, but I believe that the right group for us is particularly in the territory of Judea, and especially around the relief, the Lakesh relief. Like if some way, somehow we were able to get a hold of that DNA extracted from those sites, I think that you would see extremely high numbers within our community. Like I said, it's just a hypothesis, but that's based off of a couple of things. One is of course, we have the Lakesh relief. We also have the analysis on the skulls, which they determine were Egypto-Nubian. But also, from oral traditions for people such as the Limba, whose territory, I guess if you look at some old maps, you'll find Limba in the territory of Reuben. That's where the last place that they show up on the map is actually in Reuben. So places like either over in that area during a certain period of time, like in the territory of Reuben, in particular during the time of the Maccabees, I think that would be and an extraordinary match. But, like, I understand the game. I understand why someone would not want to release those samples to compare our DNA to, because, like I said, if we did, and if they actually truly release the genuine DNA, I truly believe that, you will see some matches, and then that will cause all kinds of problems. But just a hypothesis, just throwing it out there.
I share your excitement. I hope the community would engage. And I will tell you that I am very concerned there will not be any more samples in the near future. As Israel is going through this religious revolution, it will be even more strict about releasing this kind of genome, this information. And don't mistaken, there are thousands and tens of thousands of skeletons. The data are not the problem. The existence of skeletons that show the whole history of Israel from all the region it exists. It's hidden at some university in some core basement, but it's there. They're not being released because there are political pressures. Just imagine, just for the sake of arguments, tomorrow you're releasing all the skeletons that you collected in Jerusalem, and they're all coming up E1B1. Do you see the Ashkenazi rabbi standing on a stage and then explaining this to people and saying, well, we have rights to this temple? That's not happening, right?
Right.
So, or the Moroccan rabbi who come and saying the same thing. The Ashkenazi rabbi said, I don't know how they both can be right. Right. These are the problems we're dealing with, and I'm very concerned there may not be any more samples coming out, and we'll just have to do with what we have. Hopefully I'm wrong. But once again, the more pieces we have of this puzzle, the more we can put it together with our resources at my lab.
Awesome. Pastor Kelly, did you have any other questions before we wrap up? Like I said, I want to be mindful of Dr. Eran's time.
Well, I really appreciate it, Doctor. I don't have any other questions. He answered my questions, gave clarity on the items that I wanted to present, to give, being that he's an expert in this, in what he does. I didn't want to speculate or, have, let's just say, internet scholarship, so to speak. You know what I mean? I just wanted to ask the questions that I asked, get a direct answer from someone who's an expert in that area. And I really appreciate you, Doctor, for taking the time out of your schedule and answering these questions, because I know that it has to be a tough position to be in, because I know you're getting a lot of flack. Even some of the research, when I read your works, I know you got a lot of backlash from the Ashkenazi community because of what you released. Ask more questions, you know what I mean? And even to your point, when I did the research on 23andMe and how they had to go through a lawsuit because of some that were doing their DNA tests, they were like, wait a minute, I thought it was going to point over to here, but it's pointing over to, like you pointed out, Khazars. And it's like, wait a minute, and so there was a lot of legal things that went about with that to have have that removed. But for you to have this tool here that's really with the goal of just giving accurate information based upon what's being released, definitely appreciate it with you, with what you shared and you taking the time out to have this discussion. So I look forward to seeing how the site continue to move forward as far as the ancient DNA origins, as well as your works that you have published thus far. And I will say I've shared some of your work, some of the videos you've done years ago, so I'm very familiar with your work. So thank you again, and greatly appreciative to the time and effort you taking the time out to share this information with us.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I'm most grateful and I'm honored. Thank you. Yeah. Just one more word that I forgot to mention before. We were discussing the evidence of Levantine on African. We skipped the linguistic aspect. African linguists, many of them have Semitic origins. Tigerian is Semitic. Other languages in Central Africa have Semitic origin. This is very well documented. By no means those populations were isolated. There was always back and forth movement.
And to your point, Doctor, the Bambara, language is very close to the ancient Hebrew, and their language was used to define a lot of the words that, that was in scripture that, and that was being used in the libraries and defining and creating the dictionaries that we see today. So to your point.
Exactly. And some of the most fascinating books in Hebrew, the Hanoch books, only existed in Gaz, in Ethiopia. It extinct everywhere else, but it survived in Gaz. And fortunately, somebody took the time to translate it to Hebrew, and that's how we can read it today. And like I told you before, we see a jump of Levantine ancestry in Africa around the time of King Solomon, which is a bit 1000 BC approximately, a little later. Just coincide with the stories of Queen of Sheba coming, and those stories, whether they're real or not, I believe based on the genetic data, they capture some kind of reality where there are relationships with countries in Africa, and there is some back and forth trade. And whenever there is trade, there is gene exchange. That's how people work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Just kind of going through some of the comments here in the chat. But yeah, it's like I said, I think somebody made the comment about the people of color on the site. So just want to put out there. I know everyone has different takes on, who Israel is and what they look like. I and I think you as well, Pastor Kelly. We do believe that Israel is a nation of color, Negroid people. But that's just our platform. So we do respect different thoughts and opinions on that as well. So, but just wanted to throw that out there. All right, family. Well, Dr. Eran, thank you again for joining us. Hopefully you can get some rest now.
Going to keep working.
Any last comments you want to give about this site, your site?
No, I just want to say thank you again to you and to the community for your support. It means a lot to me. You mentioned criticism. I just want to give you an example to what it looks like. When we discovered the location of ancient Ashkenaz, I thought the community would be grateful. Finally, we solved this riddle, 3,000 years. So where was this kingdom of Ashkenaz? And by large, they will, except the Forward, which is a right-wing Jewish newspaper. 8 negative articles, one after the other. It wasn't like even respond. There was no dialogue. There were 8, one after the other. There was only one positive. It was in Yiddish, in language that very few people can read, and the writer was fired after that. This is what negative feedback looks like. And that was okay. They're entitled to their opinions, and whoever wants to know the truth went and read the paper, and we provided the coordinates on the map. You can go and find those places, those that survived on the map. But that's just the kind of disinformation we have to fight, and I appreciate, or to stand up to. And I appreciate the opportunity to do this on your platform. And thank you so much for citing my study and keep propagating the actual findings as they are.
Yep. Well, keep up the good work. Go ahead.
Can I say something real quick? Doctor, we understand the ridicule because we've come across and we actually use your work as well. And we've gotten a lot of criticism, we thought it would be accepted, but we can definitely relate to the unexpected opposite, embracing. We expected to be embraced this information, but we were, met with a lot of ridicule and borderline slanderous. But we definitely understand, and we thank you again for just pressing through the negative responses that you've gotten. Again, thank you again, sir.
Thank you.
All right, family. Well, wow, we are over 2 hours in. So thank you everyone for dialing in. So hopefully this was a blessing to you, and hopefully you learned a lot. I know I did. So I think what we'll do is that we'll close out this session, and I think most willing. I think next. We'll see, fam. I was going to say maybe next Shabbat we'll finish up on our discussion about where Israel is located. We may do it. Maybe we'll do it before, but I think we'll probably push it up to next Shabbat. So we'll get into it. We'll go down the list and show some more exciting facts about Mount Sinai, and then we'll move on to the land of Israel. All right, family. Well, stay blessed. Hopefully you can enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you later. Shalom, shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom, everyone.